Welcome to Sparking Success with Aaron Opalewski. Aaron brings you conversations that spark innovation, cultivate leadership skills, and pave the way for your business success. In each episode, we delve into the dynamic world of business and leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and success stories that fuel your professional journey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sparking Success. Today is a special episode. We have my friend Mike Williams on the podcast with us. Mike, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of your guys' podcast and excited to be on here.
Yeah, well, we're a big fan of you, Mike. And first, I just want to start off. Let me read a little bio on Mike. If you're not familiar with him, but if you're anywhere on LinkedIn, you probably know who he is because he's all over the place on it and does a great job on there. Well, let's start with his bio. So Mike's the founder of Carnegie Search. It's a team of 5 full-time recruiters in Charlotte, North Carolina, focused on placing engineering and operations leadership candidates into the manufacturing sector. Mike started his career in agency recruitment in 2017 when he won Rookie of the Year, as well as 5 straight President Clubs trips at his previous employer. In 2022, after 5 years in agency recruiting, Mike moved from Massachusetts to North Carolina to start his own business. He billed $900,000 in his first year as a solo business, and in the second year, he crossed that $1 million per year mark in individual annual billings. Mike is also a member of the Pinnacle Society, an elite group of top agency recruiters nationwide. He lives in Charlotte with his wife, Sam, and 11-month-old daughter, Zoe. Mike, it's awesome to have you on.
We had to pay him to say all that, by the way, but thank you for the high praise.
Yeah, man. Well, I figured we'd just start. I wanted to just tell a little bit of a story of how Mike and I met. And, we still never met in person, but I'm hoping we get the chance to do that soon. Mike just told me he might be coming to the Detroit area and absolutely going to take you up on that. If you do come in the area, we're going to hang out. So, but we met on LinkedIn. We met, through social. I think I probably started following Mike. I don't know, maybe it was the other way around, but I'm pretty sure I started following Mike because it started coming up on my thread. And I'm just watching his posts, and I'm like, yep, I agree with that. Yep, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's really good. Oh, man, I learned something from that. And I could just tell within, I don't know, a month or two of seeing his post come up on my feed that we were aligned in a lot of ways. And I would learn as I got to know Mike and from listening to some other podcasts that he's been on how much that was true. But that was kind of the initial spark to our relationship. We started talking on LinkedIn at one point, and next thing you know, we're on a phone call. And that's generally how stuff works in our business and in life in general in business. And here's a couple takeaways that I had from that phone call with Mike. We talked about where his business was at in the recruiting industry in general. I believe, Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you had 2 people on the team and we're just about to start your 3rd person.
Yep.
We talked on some things on that, and we talked about some kind of like next phases of growth. And, when I read that bio, that second year for Mike where he crossed that 1 million marker, and you heard he's got 5 people on his team. That's the stuff I love hearing because I can tell that he's implemented some of the things that we've talked about. He's also, it's not just like it's because of what we talked about, but just little things that we talked about, I see him now implementing in his business. And that's amazing. I mean, those are the types of people that I want to talk to, not just people that want to ask for advice or want to talk about like, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to do this for my business or whatever, but they do it. They take action. And Mike is a living example of that, and just an amazing guy. So kudos to you, man. What you guys are doing is exciting, and I leave each one of our conversations feeling energized, and I think that's good people to be around.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. There's so much there that I could comment on, but like the first thing that comes to my mind is it's interesting because I'll write stuff on LinkedIn that's like the answers to the test. And it's like I've had people say to me like, aren't you afraid to be sharing like your secrets to your success on LinkedIn? And the truth is I'm not, because I know how hard it is to implement those suggestions. Just knowing it is really like 10% of the battle. Doing it is 90%. But there are a small fraction of people out there that when they see it, they'll actually do it. And that is the coolest thing in the world to me, because I remember being that person who I was like, if you just tell me what to do, like if I have to make 100 calls a day, watch me make 110.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's so cool.
I love it, man. So we talked about kind of just picking up a free flowing conversation and doing something a little bit different. So let's get into it.
So let for everyone to know, like we were kind of pre-planning what direction do we want to take this in, and I maybe took it in a self-serving direction, because I was like, how about we do a coaching call live and in person for Aaron to kind of like dissect my business of what's going right, what's going wrong, because that's what we usually talk about when we're not on the podcast. So those kind of things is, I think, what we would be talking about if we weren't recording. So maybe it would be the most interesting and authentic kind of things to talk about here now. And so I can set the table of some of what's happened since our last conversation and today, and hopefully where I'm trying to point our business to moving forward. So when we last spoke, like you said, I had 2 employees. We're thinking about adding a third. Today we have 5 full-time recruiters. One of them today is his first day. So
Awesome.
it's busy. And we also have a 6th part-time bookkeeper. So we are doing some stuff. We're trying to do the Aaron Opolewski method of knowing your numbers and, small unit cohesion and some of these things that you've touched on in other podcasts. But what we're experiencing is we set out to try to double our business in size this year. And it was a good goal to have. We're right on track in order to do it, but it was also a bit of a naive goal, because we just said, let's hit the top line revenue number, double it. Let's see how fast and how hard that we can push it. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into with all of those things, because today, for the first time ever, I'm managing the biggest team I've ever managed, figuring out leadership stuff. I'm managing a bookkeeper. I have no accounting or finance background, so I'm learning as I go. I'm a first time dad with an 11-month-old baby at home. Uh, we just finalized a new office space lease, which was one of the most complicated things I've done so far in my business career. Lawyers going back and forth, bickering, all this crazy stuff. We just got an offer accepted on a new house. So we're going to be closing a house in 2 weeks. And then all the rest of my life stuff is still ongoing. My parents are aging, and like my dad has health stuff that I worry about and try to help him with. I'm trying to be a good dad. And so balancing everything at once is basically impossible. And so where I'm going with this is like, how do you possibly prioritize when you're in this phase of your business that you're growing faster than you've ever grown? You're trying to go from the 1 million. Last year we did 1.3 million in sales. This year our goal is 2.4. So like when you're in that leap, how do you figure out what do I do each day and what's the next right thing to do every step of the way?
Is it okay if I take it back to kind of where you talked about where you just set that target, you basically doubled that target?
Yeah.
So here would be, so we do the same thing. And I think I struggled with this early on when we had like a great success and it's exciting and we're expanding the team, but that team's also learning, right? They're brand new. And then we're trying to like reestablish like what's the next objective, what's that next target. Like we've always struggled with that. Even now, like we did the same thing. We crossed we call them igniters, but our last igniter that we crossed was in 2022. And then what did we do? We said, okay, we're going to double it up for the next one. And
Yeah.
here's the things that we need to do on it. And just hearing you say that, I think one of the things I struggle with as a leader is when we cross those things, reset them, and then miss them. And not saying that you're going to miss them. We talked about like, we just kind of said it here. So just a small little nuanced thing that I do with our teams now is like, hey, we are setting this as the next outcome objective that we're going for. Again, we call them igniters. This is the next one. We're setting out to do this next year. I cannot tell you necessarily if we're going to get this done next year or not. Here's all the things that we're going to do to make it happen. We need everyone to play their part and contribute their part. I can't guarantee you that we're going to get that done next year because we set high targets and we go after it. But I guarantee you that we will get there. The question is, what does the team look like? that's what we're going to be evaluating. That's what we're going to be working on. That's what we're focused on building people into, right? Because we got to help people develop, and where they're at now and where they're going to need to be at to achieve that, outcome is going to be two different things. So I've just found that that's taken a little bit of the pressure off me on that, is by acknowledging we're going at this thing, also acknowledging that it's going to be hard, that it's aggressive, that's how we want to build our organization to be a high performance, culture and team, and that we will get it done. As you reach a couple of those things, you can point back to your track record and show how, hey, like, look, we set out to do this, we did it. We set out to do this, we did it. Boom, 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 over and over. As you're in this stage, I think you can do the same thing, maybe not go back as far, but you also don't have to get many as people, rolling with their oars in the same direction. So I think sounds like you are in a great position to do that. But that'll be a continual question. When you cross these things, when you set that next one, how do you kind of position that? Because it puts a lot of pressure on you as the leader to be like, think about you crossed that this year, the 2.4. What's the next one going to be? Is it 4.8? Is it 5?
Yeah. And so that's like, we got to this point where we became a little bit more sophisticated in understanding our growth plan, because in the first year, in 2 years, it's just like, how fast can we grow? We want to take over. We want to be the biggest in Charlotte. We're going to get there. Just push as hard as humanly possible and we'll get there. Today, now that we're at 5 people, I actually think we're going to hold at the number of 5 people with a 6th part-time bookkeeper, but we're going to hold at that number for a little bit, because for the first time, I can't envision the path of what the structure is going to look like if I add a 6th or a 7th. Yeah. Because with going from just me to 1 full-time person under me, I had more work than I can keep up with. Let's hire 1 more. Going from just me to 1 under me to 2 under me, it's like I got more work than I can keep up with. Have them fill my orders. 2 people fill my orders instead of 1. Then when we hired the next one, it was like, well, hey, one of my guys is showing a sales aptitude. Let's let him do some of his own orders. Then hire another person. I'll have 2 under me again, and he'll start doing his own thing. Now we just hired this most recent one, so now it's me, 2 under me, my guy who's doing sales, and 1 under him. It's going to be a long time until he can keep himself busy with his own orders, keep the guy underneath him busy with his own orders, and me keep 2 people busy and need a third. There's just no way that's going to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 months. So until we can kind of dominate with that plan, I think that we're going to have to stay where we're at. So that, yeah, to answer your question, like, I don't think we're going to go from 2.4 to 4.8 in a year. I think that would just be kind of an impossible goal. But what do you think about the org chart that I'm kind of doing here, which is like trying to get everyone into a full desk role? Some people become full desk, some people don't. They just aren't. Some people don't take to sales, but the people that do take to sales, slotting in new people underneath them who do the same thing. Hopefully they become full desk. They start off supporting that billing manager type person.
Well, before I answer that, I'm going to acknowledge you real quick, because I think you answered that really well in the aspect of like, hey, I want to cross this and then ride this rather than like obsess over how to double that again. We got to kind of get up to speed, and then we'll evaluate some of that, because I know where I made a lot of my mistakes is going too aggressive, too fast, with not that we were able to generate the business opportunities because we did the recruiting and the staffing side, so we were doing contract as well right out of the gate. So we had those, but the delusion of service, as we went from 5 to 10 and then 10 to 20, in literally like a year, we did that. And then I still didn't learn my lesson because we were still out. You weren't seeing on the growth cycle yet. So it wasn't until we got to like 30, 35 people that I was like, holy crap, like what's happening to the business is not what I want it to be. Like, we're not providing a high enough level service. So hearing you say that, I think is very mature and about how you would approach it. And it's like, hey, sometimes going at the right pace to get kind of this up to speed to manage the desk is the fastest way. Because, yeah, we ramped up to that, and that sounds really good. We did that in 18 months. Well, you know what is also true? We sat there for another 2 years at about 30 to 40 people because it's really on me. I was learning. I had to catch up to the growth in regards to my acumen, my development. Like, the business can't outpace the leader. The leader
Yeah.
has to be able to grow. And at that point, it had outpaced where I was at. And it was on me to go in and figure all this stuff out. So,
And I had to learn some of this stuff too, because I've been, you take a lot of time introspective and you have conversations with people in your life who you trust. And you start to have these conversations of like, what is the true purpose of the business? And what do you really want it to mean for you and the people who are in it? And what I had to let go of in the growth part of it is like, this business is not meant to be a shrine to Mike Williams' ego. Like, that's not what it's there for. It's not just there to grow and hire more people, more people, more people. So that way I can say, boom, I got 20 people, I got 30, I got 40, I got 50. We're the biggest. Because you can either have that, or you can have a business that's about doing it right in excellence. And I've got to this point where I'm like, if I have to sacrifice the excellence quotient in order to grow, I'm not okay with that. I don't want the dilution of our service to go down and down and down. It needs to be, 10 out of 10 excellence level. And yeah, when you delegate, you're going to lose a little bit of your own way of doing things, but it still needs to be a high quality level. And until I can kind of get everyone rowing in the same direction, all 5 people who, by the way, none of them have staffing experience, and every single one of them I hired without any experience right out of college, except for one. He had like a year of sales experience. So it's a process to get them to become elite level recruiters. As awesome as they are, they're 22 and 23 years old. Like, you can't be expecting $1 million billers in your first year.
correct. Yeah, so here's something I think you do really well. And, you know, I essentially explained how we lost that over a period of time because we did this well too. And then again, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I look at it now, I think it was more about my ego and wanting to, some of it was going after the mission and really pushing the pace on that and being aggressive. But there was a part of it that was definitely like ego too. Like, oh, we're like, it was exciting to do that. Um, Without understanding the ramifications of the dilution of the service, right? So what you do well right now, and I call it on the hip training, and you reference it different, but like when you have someone start out, they will be on calls, with you, and they're on another set of headphones and they're listening to you, and they're pretty tight to you, and they're learning the right way to do that. Mike knows how to do this business right. Someone that's a good elite recruiter can spot another elite recruiter. They don't even have to hear them on the phone. It's how they talk about their conversations with candidates, how they talk about their conversations with clients. And I'll tell you, he is an elite recruiter. So the fact that he's able to put the people on his team on his hip right now, and they get to hear the right way to do this over and over and over again, it's invaluable. It's amazing, way to learn. And what I would say is do everything you can to not lose that, even as you're like, I think when you take the jump from 5 to 10 people, this is really something you'll have to think on. But your approach of like, hey, I'm really going to pour into these 5, I think that's how you do it, right? You probably start to match up your best. It might not even be your best producer, just your best teacher with the new people and put them on their hip. If Mike Williams can no longer do that because the business has kind of outpaced that. But we lost that. We just started bringing people in and we're putting them into our system. A lot of recs to work, a lot of opportunities. But once we lost that hip to hip training for a period of time, that was part of that dilution. And I think I've become obsessed on how do we get that back? Even, okay, we have 70 people on the team. How do we get that hip to hip, create that small unit cohesion where at minimum, a very capable recruiter who is good with other people and has a passion for seeing them develop is the one that's helping them out of the gate, because we also hire people without experience more than not. That's our preference, to train them to do this right. Well, that's worked really well with us. It's worked really well with you. In my opinion, that's the reason why right now you got them on your hip. So I promise that will make the organization millions and millions of dollars in placements if you figure out how to continue to cultivate that. And if you can keep going on that, like, man, look out. So that's still what we're working on to this day.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, it's really humbling and means a lot to hear you say some of these nice things. And because I meant to say this at the beginning, but maybe we could cut it out or something or do a clip. But if there happens to be anyone here who like is watching this because they know of me, which by the way, I'm kind of endlessly like amazed that people like that are out there. But if there are, and if you don't know of Aaron or this podcast, it's like this is where I go when I'm looking for things to like learn and develop my craft. Like Aaron and Spark, that's who I look up to. That's who I aspire to be as my type of business someday. So, and we're talking about giving away the answers to the test. If you follow the podcast, like it's very clear the answers of questions that you're having in the business, whether you're a recruiter trying to go from zero to $1 million of your own desk, or a billing manager, or building a business. They touch on all of these things, which is really, really kind of invaluable info. And so, the other thing that we're working on here now is we have team of 5. We're all full desk direct hire recruiters. We just had our first client who we had on direct hire say, "Can you fill this temp order for us?" Which
All right.
we're doing, and
Okay.
we're kind of trying to figure out like, do we want to self-fund it? Do we want to use one of these like payroll factoring places that will take on the insurance and whatever while we're figuring out this business? My question is like, are we at the point where it makes sense for us to focus on bringing that business on, or do we just kind of do excellent work at what we're doing now and focus on that and come back to temp in the future? Or how do you know when it makes sense to add on that line of your business?
That's a great question. It's something I want to see how the conversation goes, because, I like to make the conversation about the guest, but, selfishly, it's a question that I have for you is like, hey, do you see yourself doing it that at some point? And the reason why it was a question for me is because one of the similarities between Mike and I, that stands, and there's many, I literally have like 7 or 8 listed down, but one of them is that Mike's not interested in building a lifestyle business. He wants to build something that sustains past him, something great, something that gives the ability for others to grow and be a part of this great industry that I think Mike and I found out changed our life. That's at least what I hear when I hear you talking about it. And so I think you can do that with straight direct hire. But another way to do that is add the staffing component, add the W-2 contract labor. So I think at some point that would be the right move for you, for sure. But 2 things. One, it adds complexity. It's really it becomes, and I would think about this like, most likely you got to watch the styles, right? But the KPI set could even need to be different. For what it is on the direct side compared to the contract side. Not necessarily if it's the same search style, but if it's moving kind of like levels down in the process from like the operational leaders, that you're placing in manufacturing, you're probably going to have to look at that KPI set, because if you don't, you're going to have a blended scenario going on, and it's going to get tough to see performance. Ask me how I know this, because we've lived it. And I'll tell you, Mike, I just feel like we're now getting our arms around this. It's also going to blend your conversion rates. Like, what's a good conversion rate for you guys right now on 10 submittals?
Well, the truth is we don't track it well enough. We're just starting to get there with trying to get some of the bookkeeping going, which dovetailed into, hey, we
Just
don't
your
keep.
own desk, though. Just your own
I'll
desk.
bet you if we send 10 people, we close 2 or 3 of mine,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. I think if I send 3 people to a job, they're going to hire 1.
Yeah. Well, that's good. To me, I didn't play baseball, but I know enough about baseball to compare it to like, hey, in baseball, if you go 3 out of 10, you bat 300%, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame. Contingent recruiting is the exact same to me. If you can get a 30% conversion ratio on non-volume like niche positions, you're going to rock and roll. Well, if you go into that contract space and you're a couple levels down, one interview, go to works, different margins, those fill ratios might need to creep up higher.
Mm-hmm.
And the volume of submittals may change too. And so in and of itself, you don't have to change anything. You got to watch those orders as they're coming up. And you can't, if it's higher volume, like let's say you got into a call center, and that's not what it sounds like this was, but if you picked up a call center, that could be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, Mike, this business. If I'm working on an operations manager, direct hire, $200,000 a year, let's just say, and I'm also, I'm recruiter A. Recruiter B is working on call center openings that are entry level at $17 an hour, and they need 100 of them. Those are going to be two different style searches, conversations, amount of calls that need to happen. So they're probably going to need different KPI sets. So I think that's really what creates the complexity, is that you have to start to lead and manage people in a different way. And you got to watch that once you go into that bucket. I think if someone's prepared for that up front, they're best prepared for it. The more prepared we are, the better, although we do have to jump. So that's important. Now let's go to the financial side of it, though. There's no wrong time for you to jump in if you understand the complexity that might be coming with it. I don't know your business entity structure. I don't know what you're doing with distributions. I mean, I hear you, and it feels to me like you're doing the right things. Mike is not out there spending all his money that the business is creating. I hear that he's pouring back into his team. He wants us, I'm hearing all the right things. But if you're not, one reason that you'd want to start focusing on maybe building your equity right now while you're doing direct hires. And, I don't know what kind of entity you are. A lot of ours are S Corp. So we're going to do.
Yeah, we are too. Yeah.
Okay. So here's stuff you won't hear. And this is, talk to your accountant and, whoever else. But this is the type of stuff we get into that you just don't hear. So my preference is to do a couple things. We're going to pay our taxes, first and foremost on a distribution at estimates. We're then going to leave in a percentage of that net income, for the quarter to grow the equity in the business. Now we're going to do that for multiple reasons. We'll come back to that in a second. And then it all depends on seasons. You'll hear a lot of this stuff. It sounds good. It gets clicks. It gets likes on basically leave all your money in your business, go all in, do all this stuff. And look, I'm all for investing in your business and doing that stuff. But I think at some point we take so much risk, and part of taking that risk is having a good infrastructure. And some of that is your personal infrastructure financially. So I'm a big proponent of taking a chunk of distribution out, get it out of the company and into some other accounts, or, hey, live life, a little bit. You can now, it doesn't mean you go spend all your money. Absolutely not. So I like to leave, when I'm in a rhythm on this, 20% of the equity into the business per quarter. Now that was a framework given me by our banks when we flipped from factoring to a line of credit.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I didn't understand this. And, when we were factoring, we were basically ripping out the whole distribution, and we were good enough in sales to just re-up it every quarter. And we did that into the 30s of people, but it worked for us, but it wasn't ideal. And then when we flipped that line of credit, there was a period of time where I took no distributions personally. We paid the taxes, and we were building the equity to get in line with our covenants because we wanted to borrow more money to grow.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, and I'm like, wait a minute. You're meaning we just made X amount, this quarter, and we're going to pay our taxes. And then you're telling me I can't take any out. Like, I opened the business to have some freedom. And I'm
why do you like, so I know what you're talking about. Why do you like paying the taxes on estimates? I actually like it too, just because I fall asleep better at night. But why do you say it's better to prepay them on estimates?
Look, you hear different things. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in that. Like, go to your accountant, but like, uh, I like to have that done on estimates up front. I don't want any penalties. I don't want to hear about why it's smarter to put it here and then there. Like, just look, here's what I'm going to do. Doesn't mean that there's not other ways to do it. I'm not even giving that as advice. I'm literally just sharing what we do,
Hmm.
and how it's worked well. So if you're building up equity, right? And let's say you build up, 100,000 in equity, a couple 100,000, $1 million, like whatever it is, right? And that's sitting, mostly in your account. Um,
Hmm.
well, okay, now you got options. Now you
Hmm.
got freedom. So if you can do that and then you turn on contract, you might be able to self fund some of that.
Yeah.
Let's say you don't want to self fund that. Well, you're in a position. Basically, the only time the bank's going to loan you money is when you don't need it.
Right. Yeah.
That's not technically correct, but it's pretty darn close. Like,
Hmm.
the better financial position you're in, the more likely to loan the money they are, right? So, um, and then you're going to have those covenants anyways, right? So if you go to them and you're building up some of that equity and you wanted to do it on a line of credit, that's how you could start to do your contract, facilitate that. Or you could kind of be your own bank on that. Um, Another conversation, but I'd probably say take it out, put it back in as a promissory note. If there's partners and one partner is putting in, the money and the other one's not, um, you'd have to talk to your that's where we do it in our business at Talent, where I own 100% of that. We didn't put in promissory notes. We just built the bank account up big enough and then wiped out the line, when it was time. But if I would have been leaving that equity in right from the get-go, we probably never would have had to use the line of credit, or not as much. And
Hmm.
if you're starting out in staffing and it's, a few people here or there, hey, a few good quarters, and you could set yourself up to maybe like, hey, let's start our head count and we'll take it up to 10 because that's going to be X amount on net 15 terms. So I'll
Yeah.
pause there for a second, but that's, you could do those things, or you could do factoring. Factoring's more expensive. I'm not going to knock it because that's how we built our first business. I became a multimillionaire using factoring, and we used it at Talent out of the gate for about 18 months, and then we made the transition. But that
Hmm.
transition was a little painful for me.
Yeah. Changing wallets, they call it, from
Yeah,
their wallet to your own.
wait a minute. Like,
So it's we're figuring it out because it's so interesting what you're saying. Like, I was having this line of credit conversation like 6 months ago when we were flush with cash. And it was
yeah,
like someone said, you should go get a line of credit. I'm like, I don't need one. Why would I need a line of credit? Right. And then, like, all of a sudden your life changes and you find a house that you want. And you're like, we want to do a great down payment on a house so we have a low interest rate for a shorter period of time. And that's like, shit, there goes my equity. Like, not all of it, but like a lot of it, And so it's like, I wish I had that line of credit. And then boom, it's like, well, if we go and ask for the line of credit now, which I haven't done yet, it's like, I'll bet you my terms will be way worse because they see that you have less equity in the business. I should have asked for it when I had the most possible. But I mean, the good thing of all this is, like, I feel so much better about these conversations since I got my bookkeeper in the business,
yes,
because I was doing exactly what you said, which is making emotional decisions into the business. Someone comes in, they have a good week, they pick up 2 job orders. It's like they want a piece of software. You got it, man. You're
yeah,
picking up job
yep,
orders. You have whatever you want. Literally, they don't even close an order. It's just like you feel like they're doing good. And then the bookkeeper comes in, and this was like a whole ball of wax because he's like looking at my QuickBooks. He's like, I think I'm the bee's knees over here because our business is growing. And he's like, some business you're running, Mike, your numbers are like all over the place. You're not tracking expenses. He's like, you don't have a budget. You don't know how profitable you are. And we actually kind of had a funny thing happen because the first day he comes in, I'm like, this is your job for day one. Like, this is what I'd like to know. And by the way, I respect the guy so much. He's a retired CPA. We're so fortunate to have him. He's only doing it mostly for fun, which is really cool. And he's really,
It's
really
amazing.
smart. So we recruited a good one. But I was like, I want to take this much out of the business to put towards my down payment of my house. And I want to make sure that no matter what, we have 6 months of expenses in our business, cash, that we could survive for 6 months on the cash we have. But I don't know how much we spend a month, right? So he goes in there and he's looking and he's like, all right, I'll message you in a little bit after I figure it out. He sends me a message in 2 hours. He's like, we need to talk. So I come back there. He's like, Mike, I don't know if you're going to make it like to the end of the month where your numbers are going. And I'm like, my heart stops, right? And so he's showing me all this stuff. And I'm like, Barry, his name's Barry. I'm like, Barry, I know you're going to think this is naive and I know how bad this looks, but I'm not worried about it. And I'll tell you why. Something's wrong on these numbers because I know our cash balances, I know our accounts receivable. I don't know what's wrong on this, but something's wrong on it. So we start digging through all the numbers, come to find out I have a $5,000 limit on my card. I can only spend 5,000 a day, but I have vendors that have been pinging me for six, seven, $10,000 payments, right? And you're small, you're scaling the business, you have to prioritize. Vendors
Hmm.
coming after me for money. Hey, your card is declined, card is declined. That doesn't always get resolved in the first day. Like, I'm okay if that takes a week or so to get your money because and I'll send them a note, split it up into two payments, takes them 6 weeks. They keep charging it six, seven, eight. Well, for some reason, every time a charge over 5,000 got declined, QuickBooks was logging it that it did get paid. So I had like hundreds of thousands in phony charges that my bookkeeper was like, why are you spending $600,000 on LinkedIn? I'm like, we're not doing any of that. So it was
You're like, I'm
stressful, right?
invested, but I'm not that invested.
It was stressful as hell. So I go home from work and my wife's like, how's it going with the bookkeeper? I'm like, horrible. Like he doesn't even think he's about to get paid his first paycheck. But we figured it out, and now it's like we do know what it costs every month. We spend $70,000 or $80,000 a month. So now I know you take 70,000 or 80,000, you multiply it by six, and that's our 6 months of expenses we need to have in the bank. And just doing that, I fall asleep so much better every night because at least I know, you know, roughly what it's going to cost me to operate the business.
Yeah, well, that is a great hire for you guys, and you know, you bring up a good point, like that. When you're starting out with a hire like that, there's probably going to be some stuff to clean up, and it's good for you to be involved in that, right? Because they're just looking at paper, or they're looking at this on a computer screen, right? They don't know the business, so they're just seeing what they see come through. And if something like that is going on, and it's like causing kind of like double invoicing, or multiple invoices to look like they're appearing up on the books, like that's something that it's only going to get caught if you're looking, or get caught a lot quicker if you're looking at it and you're like, well, wait a minute, that's like, here's what's happening. Let's go into the bank statement and figure this out. So it's good that you were involved in that. You brought something up, and you're learning this just at a great time. It's like where people come to you and you're just like, yeah, like we'll add that. Yeah, we'll add that. Like, man, I did the same thing. I was laughing when you said that because I'm like, man, at one point I did that. We had 51 people on our team. I remember the number exactly because unfortunately, we did not do a layoff, but we went through a period where we didn't hire, and we had some performance conversations. And then what do you know? COVID happened, right on the back of that, and then we didn't hire for longer. And I think at our lowest point, we had 29 people on the team from
Wow.
51. One of the most painful things for me personally, just because I want this to be a great place. I want to do great things. I want it to be, our purpose of the company is to help people grow. And that was tough over a period of time. It was probably most of 2019. And then, we hit this high point in 2018. was just way out ahead of our skis on some of this stuff. And this is the stuff that was going on, is that people were just, you got 51 people. So you can imagine every day people are coming to you like, oh, let's try this tool, or I want to do this, or, this or that. It's like, we had kind of figured out who we should hire and who we shouldn't, because we had put in core values and we're actually hiring based off, like, we're doing better on that. But I was still struggling with like running the business. I said like, hey, we want to do over this much in net income. I'd figured out that equity thing, that I got to be growing the equity. But we're like, get over this much net income and like, let's go at it. Let's grow, outside of that. And there were some good things in that, because we did grow extremely fast. But it hurt us from a dilution of service standpoint. And then I didn't understand. I'd just be like that, like, hey, you want this tool? Your number looks good. Let's give it a shot. I trust you. Or like, hey, give me, like, okay, here's your reason. It's just like done based off feelings. And so as some things corrected, and we had a little bit of 2008 was a peak, or 2018 was a peak. 2019, we started to see a little lull, but our expenses were going way up and our team member spend was going way up. And so when our revenue and gross profit, took a little course correction down, it really started to sting. Then you factor in COVID, and by the time we looked up, we got to like June or July of that year, we were down to like 29 people.
Yep. Yeah.
So really painful. But here's the good things. And this is where it's like, you don't necessarily have to go through all this pain. You can learn from other people. But, so I'm like, man, I really got to learn. I know how to sell. I know how to recruit. I know how to do this business. We've done some good things. Like, we can clearly grow, but I've learned about leadership. I've learned about how to treat people, and how to, we know about training them to an extent, but I don't really know the business side of this well enough. And just kind of picking this number and saying, go at it. And I could see that even when we do that, when we course correct under that, and we don't understand these other parts of this business, it really hurts the business. And so not wanting to go through that again, or at least wanting to put ourselves in a position where we, didn't have to experience that. I'm like, I got to learn more about how to operate this thing. And that's where I learned a lot about these different KPI sets, right, for different styles of recruiting, which we do a ton. Learned about not crossing up, styles of recruiting. I learned about the difference between being centralized or decentralized. And we put in place a gross profit strategy, which part of that was operational costs, right? And we look at that monthly now, and we can't get outside that. We don't want to get outside that blueprint. If we do, we know we're adding too much stuff, right? So it's like, okay, I don't want to use the word easier, but in us going up to right around 70 plus people, because we put these disciplines and principles in place, it's made it easier to make decisions and communicate with people in a way that's like, hey, like, that's a great idea. Here's where you guys are producing. Here's where we're at from an operational spend. Let's table that, or, we'll look into that, or no, we're not going to make an ad, for the rest of the year on this right now, because we've added, a Zoom info, or more money on Indeed, or more money on LinkedIn. And here's what it's spitting out into performance. We want to see more from it first.
It's fascinating to me. And like,
first.
I feel really fortunate, because I think part of the reason I hired this bookkeeper, a big part of it was because hearing you talk about this stuff. And I could so easily see how a business could be rocking and rolling on sales. So you hire people, so you introduce more expense into the business because you think you can, because your sales numbers are higher than you've ever had. Then all of a sudden something gets tweaked, and you're like, something's got to be wrong with the numbers, because we're not making money. And then you bring the bookkeeper in, and then it's hard to turn the ship around. So I feel fortunate that we got a bit ahead of it. It's still painful to know, like, hey, you are making money, but your books suck. Like you're like, you do a terrible process. And like, but this leads me to another thing I wanted to ask you about, because it dovetails into this conversation, which is really like the element of risk
Mhm.
that comes into the business as you continue to scale. Because I think a lot of times people who start businesses, you get seen as a risk taker, which you are in some ways. But I think a lot of times you're more of an efficient risk mitigator than anything else. And what I mean by that is, like, when I first started in sales, my family told me, don't do sales. It's too risky. Take a job, work at the DMV, and work for the state, and you'll have a pension your whole life. But like, I looked at it and I was like, I actually think that's a lot more risky, because I can bet on myself in sales and make money. Then I quit my sales job. I took a 100% commission job. My family told me I was crazy, but I was like, look at this comp plan. If I come in and perform, I'm going to triple my pay. And I did. And then all of a sudden I'm doing that for 5 years, and I'm like, I'm going to quit my job, move from Massachusetts to Charlotte, start my own business and start from scratch, walk away from $1 million desk. And people are like, you're freaking crazy. Like, you could ride that $1 million desk forever. But I knew in my head the company I was working for was not doing well. There was no growth strategy. I knew that the market that I was in was a tiny market in Western Massachusetts where businesses were leaving left and right. And that I could pick a hot market like Charlotte, do it myself, take off all the governors on what I was doing that the business was putting on me, and double it or triple it. So was it a risk? Yeah, it was a risk, but like in some levels too, it was less of a risk because I knew what was coming from that, right? But now today, once you go from hiring one person to two to three to four to five, there is a for sure element of risk that's harder to track and harder to manage. And in the back of my mind, I think when I did this whole business, I was like, we're going to grow something, we're going to do something important, we're going to bring people into this industry that deserve to be here, that are going to learn and grow and have the same, great experience in recruiting that I had, because I feel a duty to pay it forward, and that's a great mission to have. But another part of it was like, I'm going to make enough money that maybe I could pay my house off early and be comfortable and safe and kick back and not have to take risks anymore. But that doesn't happen. The risks just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so my question is, does there ever come a time when like you actually feel like you're safe, that the risks are getting smaller, that you can kick back, take your hand off the throttle a bit in the business? And if it does, like, at what general size do you start to feel that safety? Because to me, it feels like I'm somehow getting further and further away from it every day that we grow.
Great question. I think back to my opinion on why you should rip out some of, if you're making money, right? Why you rip out some of the distribution, pull it out of the business, and whether you spend it, invest it, give it away, put together a rainy day fund, which I think you should probably do all four of those, personally, because do we invest everything? We invest a lot. I think a premise is spend less than you make. That's a great like principle to live off of. But then it's like, hey, we got one life. We're going to work hard. There's going to be things that we miss. Back to your balance question, like, um, there isn't a balance. There's a focus, right? So it's like, man, I want to be present where I'm at. I want to be where my feet are. Um, and I'm going to be able to make time and be present for my family. But part of that is I'm going to be making a lot of time for my business and what we're doing. And there's things that I'm going to miss. So as part of that, like, hey, I want to make sure that we're having great experiences as a family. So some of that, as you know, having a family requires spending money, whether that be the home that you live in, vacations that you take, things that you do together. Like, so it's like, do the investment. I am a big proponent of doing that. You know, not to get like extremely like biblical or anything like that, but a big thing for me, and this is something that God's worked on with me, because it wasn't always this way, because I came up with almost no money and I felt like no one ever gave me anything. Like, hey, you should give someone opportunity, but like, I'm not giving my money away. I worked hard and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and God, God's just really worked on that, in my life. It took well over a decade for me to really get kind of into a rhythm with this. But now it's like, hey, look, like, anything that we do or we've had the ability to do or that we're going to do, he's got his hand on it. And, it's not all about money, but like whether it's me giving him the credit or acknowledging that in my conversations with people. I don't have to be real preachy, but if people ask me about life or whatever, like, hey, it's part of my life, so I'm going to bring it up. I think part of that is being generous, with our money to our church and to things that we're interested in, right? So I do those things. I have a rainy day fund, our money set on the side that can be disposed. It's like you get those things set up, and that's going to evolve as life changes, because like your taste and what you're spending on and what you're investing on is probably going to grow. But having those things set up allow you to keep taking those risks and be in a situation where, like, if something doesn't go right with that, is it really going to affect your life?
Yeah.
And the answer is early on and in your core businesses, it might, for a period of time. That's why it's like build that war chest of investments, of experiences, of a rainy day fund, and then hopefully, giving the things you're passionate about. But don't do none of those things, and don't do just one of them. I like doing all of them. And the more that we've done that, the more aggressive I've got with my, like, I know how much we spend. I know when we're going outside of that, like we're similar to your situation. We've decided to build another home, and there's days when I'm like, man, like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Because we love our house. We've been in our house 8 years tomorrow, and we moved in on our wedding anniversary, or our wedding night, and our wedding anniversary is tomorrow. So easy to remember.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a great home. We get to have a lot of great experiences there, but we want a little bit more space. We want to, not that we're going to protect our girls from everything, right? But we want our home to be a place where they want to be at, where they want to bring their friends, where they're around. And that's just important to us. So that's part of the reasons we're doing that, right? So, you buying that home, like, even though it's like a gulp in the throat moment.
Yeah, it hurt.
It's like, hey man, you got Zoe, you got your wife, like, why, you want to be able to live your life. You work really hard. So I think some of that's good. Just make sure you're working on your investments. You're working on rainy day fund, because you might need these things at some point, because there's going to come a season where maybe you don't take a distribution for a quarter or 2 quarters or a year. Hopefully not, but things happen. Storms come in business. The better setup you are on that, on the back end of that, I think the more risk you can tolerate. And it's just my opinion, you can run the business better, because you can kind of step outside what's going on in the moment and do what's best for the longer term.
Yeah, and no one likes a desperate salesman either, right? Like, if you're desperate for the money, you're probably probably not going to close anything. So, but I'm glad you. Yeah.
I mean, again, it doesn't. I'll just use an easy number. If I had $100,000 quarter, well, at least 20,000 is going in to build up the equity in the business. Let's just say 30% goes to tax estimates. It's probably more than that, but let's just call it that. Okay, well, there's 30,000 there, and then I got 50,000 to take out. So okay, some of that's going to go to living, some of that's going to go to investment. I'm going to give some of it away, and I'm going to build up my rainy day fund. If I already got my rainy day fund built up, all that rainy day fund slides over into the investments. Probably not going to spend it. I'm going to double down on my investments. And you just do that, whether you're doing distributions monthly or quarterly or whatever they are. It's like quarter by quarter, you just kind of build that up. And I think when I look at like what we've done, and we self-finance these 6 other companies that we put in with the like we are the bank on those 6. And, those are all promissory notes that I have, but I understand where I want to put my risk. I would rather risk my money in these businesses that I control, in an industry that I know, in a situation where we're collaborating with each other, than go send it off to some investment that I have no control over.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I'm comfortable taking risks as long as I'm the one controlling the outcome of it.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think you're in the right, like you keep doing that, but I would be, don't, not that you do, but like pulling a little bit of that to the side and then stacking it that way. Again, my preference, but that's what gives you the ability to come back on the other side and say, let's hire these people. Let's go into contract. Let's expand the office. Let's give the team this additional tool. Yeah, that's going to clip us for $25,000 in profit, or, you know, but guess what? That's over, the next 90 days, or that's over the next year. Here's what this is going to do on a 3-year outlook. Here's what this is going to do on a 5-year outlook. We're going to get that back 100x.
Hmm.
We're going to pour into, like, this person needs this tool to do the best version of their job. And you just get like faster and faster at making those decisions that are right, even though it's an investment of money. But if you have a gross profit strategy that says, hey, we're still playing with inside of that, and you're not living or dying on every distribution check, you're in a position to really you're foundationally set up to take more risk.
Yeah, and I love what you said because I think one thing I learned this from Dave Ramsey actually, is like it's all God's money anyway in the end. And we trick ourselves into thinking that if I just make this much, then I'm going to be all set. No one could hurt me at that point. I'd have my house paid for. No one could touch it. Well, it's like at the end of the day, if God wants you to have the house, you'll have it. And if not, then you won't. Doesn't matter how much money you have because you're not really in control of it anyways. And so the prism I try to make my money decisions within is, for some reason, God is trusting me with this money right now. What do you think he wants you to do with it?
Yeah.
That's what I try to do. And it's like, doesn't mean you shouldn't spend money. Like, we looked at a house that was towards the top of our budget, not beyond our budget and not the very top, but towards the middle top of our budget. And it scares me a little to spend the money, but I'm looking at that house and I'm like, I think that I'm meant to raise my family here. Like, I actually think that our family would have an amazing experience in this house. And there were other houses that were similar that we looked at that were not as family oriented, but they had a view or they had a pool. And I'm like, I don't know that I'm meant for that house because that house doesn't mean what a house means to me. Because what a house means to me is the place where your family has the most enjoyment, right? So I try to think of it that way and just remind myself that to some extent you're not in control of these things anyways, so try to make
Mm-hmm.
smart decisions, and there's never going to be a day when there's zero risk into your life because of money.
Yeah. Yep, I think you do your best to set it up, and I like to say, to much is given, much is required, right? So as your business is growing, um, and you're stewarding, you have leadership over a bigger and bigger amount of people. You have the responsibility to set that up in a way that can be successful, like when things are good and to the best of your abilities. There's certain things that, like, hey, things could happen, we can't control everything, right? But like, we got to be able to take some punches, and the company, the leader, should take those punches, not the person that you just hired a month ago.
Yeah, I know you can't be too crazy, but I'm taking plenty. That's why I never used to have any of this gray hair, but since I started the business, it's just like game changer, man. And the not sleeping with the baby, that combo is really what gets you.
How, dude, I was listening to, I think, your podcast with Ben again. Are you guys, are you out of that zone? Are you getting to sleep now? Or?
I gotta tell you, so my daughter's amazing. I never knew I could love anyone the way that I love her. She's not a good sleeper, and she's just gonna have to own that. I'm not trying to be critical, but she's a very poor sleeper, and she's gonna be 11 months here, and she wakes up 2 times every single night, sometimes three. My wife takes the brunt of it. My wife is like doing amazing things that I didn't think were even humanly possible, but she's every work night she's up 2 or 3 times a night, and honestly most weekends too. And I try to help in on the weekends, but I can't wake up 3 times a night and then try to perform at work. So no, the short answer is no, she's not sleeping.
Man, I heard that, like we're just back in that phase now too with our 2.5-year-old. Like she's been fine for a while, and now just last month or so, like she won't stay asleep. So it's my wife took a picture of me this morning. She was sleeping with us in our bed, and her like foot was like kicking me in the face or whatever. She sent it to me. I'm like, oh, that's great. So, but
Oh man, it's funny. I used to love to sleep, and I used to be like, "Oh, I wonder if I'm getting enough REM sleep because I probably won't perform enough." Now it's like if you get 6 hours in a night, you're happy, and you just keep it moving.
all part of life. So cool, man. Anything else that you wanted to share before we end up? I want to be respectful of your time.
No, hey, I could sit around and do this all day, but I appreciate you, and hopefully this format worked. I don't know. I guess we'll see how people like it. I hope people dig it. I feel like it's the type of podcast that I would like to hear if I was just listening to one. Is like, what do people talk about when they're worried about growing their business? And this to me is a very real conversation of these are really the growth blockers and bottlenecks. I wrote them down, but that we're dealing with. So anyone who's in this same business probably will experience some variation on these themes of when they're trying to grow from 0 to 5 people and beyond, and hopefully it added some value into them.
Yeah, I don't know how it'll hit in regards to people listen to it or not, but I know this stuff is like invaluable into growing a recruiting and staffing business, and really I think any business, specifically service type, like these are the things that are vital to your success. So thanks, Mike, for being on.